The fate of Roe versus Wade hangs in the balance. Back in December, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which would limit a woman's right to an abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. If the court rules that the U.S. Constitution is neutral on the matter of abortion, the power to regulate it will rest in the hands of the states. That would change the lives of more than 36 million women across the country. While more than 25 states are expected to ban or limit abortion, some are preparing to fight back to preserve reproductive rights. Lawmakers in Vermont are preparing for a post-Roe v. Wade America, voting yesterday to move forward on a constitutional amendment known as Proposal 5 that will protect various forms of reproductive rights in the state, including abortion. It will go before voters in the November election, and if passed, it will make Vermont the first state to explicitly protect reproductive freedom in its constitution. Vermont residents would still have access to abortions under a law that was passed in 2019 that guarantees that right. But advocates of Prop 5 say that both the law and the proposed constitutional amendment are needed in the event that Roe v. Wade is overturned. For more on this, I want to bring in Lucy Lerich. She is the Vice President of Public Affairs for the Planned Parenthood Vermont Action Fund. Good evening, Lucy. First, just start by telling us how Prop 5 would expand reproductive protections if there's already a law on the books protecting abortion.
Yeah, so it's a great question. Amending the Constitution of Vermont, the Vermont Constitution, is a multi-year process. So it would take a number of years, and it's very difficult to amend the Constitution. It's a 4-year process where the amendment would have to be voted on by the Senate and the House in 2 consecutive biennium. All elected officials in Vermont serve 2-year terms. So there's an election in between those 2 sessions of the legislature where they're voting on the amendment. And then after, as though that weren't enough, then it goes to the voters in a referendum, a ballot measure. So amending the Constitution is a very difficult thing to do. And because we saw what is possible from the last presidential administration with regards to rights, we felt like it made a lot of sense to take this step to amend our Constitution to secure this right, because we know that legislatures can flip. We know that ideology is swinging around a lot, and that all it would take is one new legislature to come in and they could repeal the law and repeal it and replace it with a ban, and Vermonters would have no protection. So we know nationally that people really do support reproductive rights and abortion rights, and that the referendum part would be very hard to repeal once it got in.
I mentioned this earlier, but some states already explicitly permit abortions based on certain conditions. And Vermont is one of 3 states, as well as the District of Columbia, that protect the right to abortion throughout pregnancy, period, without state interference. What does it say to you about the future of reproductive rights in America when so few states in this country actually have laws protecting it?
Well, I think it's what it says to me is that this is an ideological decision by a very small minority of people. We know through polling that there's a range between 70 and 80% of Americans think abortion should remain safe and legal. Yet we have 26 states, as you pointed out early in the opening of this segment, 26 states and that are going to affect at least 36 million people who are poised to ban abortion outright. So what does it say if nearly 80% of Americans support abortion rights, yet 26 states are poised to ban it? It tells me that something is going on within the larger political context where a very small minority is somehow grasping power and politicizing this right.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because we talk so much about minority rule here on this show. I mean, the reality is that we have a new American majority, certainly of people of color, who are the majority of the demographics in this country, of the population. And as you're citing polling, the vast majority of this country believes in women's ability, right, to be able to choose whatever they want to do with their bodies, and that be their decision. So the fact that we have this minority rule situation where a handful of actors are able to control the outcomes for millions and millions and millions of people's lives is the problem and the connective tissue here with this issue and so many. Now, what we do to push back, the devil of the details matter. And some are concerned about the wording of your amendment there, since it doesn't actually contain the word abortion. Is there some concern that the verbiage is actually too vague?
Well, I think that is something that opponents bring up because they want to intimidate and scare people into voting no when it comes to the November election. In fact, the language, it's one sentence, it's very simple, elegant, one sentence. If you don't mind, I can read it to you.
Sure.
That an individual's, so it just reads that an individual's right to personal reproductive autonomy is central to the liberty and dignity to determine one's own life course, and shall not be denied or infringed unless justified by a compelling state interest achieved by the least restrictive means. That language was very carefully crafted. It was reviewed and put together by constitutional law experts, lawyers across the country reviewed this language, and every word was chosen very carefully. Reproductive liberty and reproductive autonomy is very well defined in the legal canon. There are cases before this that went before the Supreme Court. There's lots of legal precedent that defines that language. In addition, if this is ever litigated, the courts would also have an opportunity to look at the legal record and the intent language that is very well spelled out in the Vermont legislature, that this reproductive autonomy and reproductive liberty is defined as the right to an abortion, the right to, decide if and when to become a parent, to carry a pregnancy to term, and the right to choose or refuse temporary or permanent sterilization. So that those things, those very specific things, are defined in the legal canon. So for those people who are saying that the language is vague, they are just their opponents looking to derail and cast doubt in voters' minds.
The use of the word liberty there is such a powerful one, because speaking of the opponents often like to try and co-opt liberty and freedom through their own conservative lens, as if that means patriotism. But the way that they're defining liberty and freedom generally means that most people don't get to have liberty and freedom. And I wonder if there was some thought as well from the political campaign messaging side of this about the nuance of those words and how they might land in the broader electorate.
Well, sure. I think we were looking at, as the language was being developed, we wanted to make sure that it was going to be solid. We wanted to make sure that it was going to survive legal challenges, and so that's why we looked at legal precedent in all those cases. And yes, the fact that liberty and freedom are included in there is not a mistake. It's because those words are also exist in the legal canon in other cases, but it's also, it's also really powerful language that we felt really captured what we wanted this amendment to do. And it's the truth, right?
So I have 1 minute left with you. How can Vermont serve as a safe haven for the disadvantaged people in other states who don't have access to reproductive rights, including abortion?
Well, that's a really great question. We are currently in the process within our affiliate of having doing some post-Roe planning. We're trying to figure out how we can, cope and adjust and adapt to this new post-Roe world that we're expecting to be coming down the pike as early as this summer. We are also a state that is surrounded by other states that provide abortion access and reproductive health care. So, and California, as you may have seen or heard through your other work, California is doing a lot of work specifically around this issue and trying to become a safe haven for people seeking reproductive health care.
Lucy Lerich, thank you so much for joining us tonight to talk about all that's happening in Vermont, perhaps a model for other states as well. Thank you very much.